Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. I'll be talking to you about storage on AWS and why now is the time to move to AWS storage. I want to keep this quite interactive. I've got a few demos planned. We'll jump into the demos kind of through the presentation. I'll start off with why use AWS for storage, give you an idea of some use cases, and we'll go from there. So why choose AWS for storage? How I like to reflect on this is by considering what might have been in the olden days. In the olden days, you'd have had to do quite elaborate capacity planning. You'd have had to make sure that if you buy storage now, that you buy enough storage for it to last for a long time. Budgeting might have been a concern. Managing that storage might have been a concern. Provisioning that storage for users might have been a concern. So a lot of the value that you see here is kind of the opposite of those challenges, right? So you only pay for what you use. You don't have to do capacity planning. You don't have to provision, double of everything for redundancy. Users can just jump in and get started with it really easily. It is, scalable globally, and you can just kind of jump in and get going with AWS storage. Some other benefits around AWS storage just is in terms of all the partnerships. And, there are a huge number of vendors that integrate quite tightly with a number of AWS services. Often it's S3. We'll touch on that a bit later, our simple storage service. But there's a lot of integration and a lot of value that you can get through the partnership of AWS. And, these are just some of the AWS partners in terms of using storage on AWS. The next thing I want to mention, you can read through some of these use cases yourself, but I guess the point I want to make is that there's no need to boil the ocean, as they say. You can, and many of our customers start, simply with a storage only migration. So where you have requirements maybe for backups, or you have requirements for archiving, or you need some file shares because maybe the storage on your on-premises or colo data center is running out of capacity. And so you can start there and then kind of expand your footprint across multiple AWS services. So don't feel that you need to now build data lakes immediately. There is a journey you can take, and you can start really as small as you like. Just a brief primer. What I'm going to be talking about, and good to maybe think about, is block storage. You can consider as the solid state drive or magnetic hard disk in your PC or laptop. That is the block storage. So it's as if I handed you a physical hard drive. As you get it kind of out of the shop, there may, there's not necessarily any host file system on it. You'd deploy a file system on it, but block storage is effectively that. It's just that hard disk. File storage you can think of as a Windows file server, as a NAS, where you can now connect to, an NFS or SMB volume. So it's an already formatted volume or disk that you can just kind of attach to your instance and start using. And then object storage is a little different in that it is kind of metadata oriented. It's for storing objects with metadata describing those objects, like file name, file date, storage class, content type. And it's more suited for, we'll talk about it in a bit more detail just now, but basically unlimited capacity storage requirements with a high level of durability. And so I mentioned the object store. We have the Amazon S3 service to meet those requirements. I mentioned the block store, and that is where Amazon EBS comes in. And then under file, you can see we've got a few different types of file storage. AWS Backup, I'll cover towards the end, and I'll also go through some of our transfer services and edge processing options later. So let's jump into S3. So S3 is our object store. S3 stands for that simple storage service, which is why we got 3 S's and we call it S3. It's basically a web accessible object store. You'll be interacting with objects through an API or through HTTPS protocol. It gets 11 nines of durability. The expected loss that you can, out of 11 nines is equivalent to 1 object out of every 10 million objects over the duration of 10,000 years. So I'm sure that gives you some idea of just how durable it is. You shouldn't expect more than, I'll repeat it, 1 object lost out of every 10 million stored over the duration of 10,000 years. The total volume of data and number of objects you can store are unlimited. Individual S3 objects can range from 0 bytes to a maximum of 5 terabytes. That's for an individual object. And the largest object you can upload in a single put is 5 gigabytes. That is heavily integrated into AWS kind of across the board and also our partner offerings. I won't read through all of this. Suffice to say that there are loads of different storage classes, and each of those storage classes comes in at a different price point and fulfills a different kind of use case. So active, frequently accessed data, you'd typically put in S3 standard. If you're going to be archiving stuff and it doesn't need to be immediately accessible, you could put it in S3 Glacier towards the end here. And you can see the price difference. It's basically just over 2 US cents for S3 standard, and it's under half a cent for S3 Glacier. So lots of options here. The other thing to bear in mind is that you can set up your own lifecycle rules that effectively move data between these classes automatically. So you could kind of say after, a month, S3 should go from S3 standard, your data should go from S3 standard to S3 infrequently accessed, and after 6 months, it should go into S3 Glacier. So you can kind of optimize your usage and costs that way. Cool, so let me quickly show you S3, and I'll also show you CloudFront, which is our content delivery network. So let me jump across to that quickly. Cool, so what I want to show you is S3. I'm also going to show you something else called CloudFront, which I didn't mention earlier, but works quite nicely with S3 to deploy a website. So let's start with S3. I'm going to click on S3 from the main management console, or I can search here, S3. That takes us to the S3 dashboard, and we can just click on Create Bucket on the right. And I will call it Demo Bucket by Peter, August 2021. I'll leave that as standard. I'm going to leave block all public access on. That really is the safest. I'm going to click on Create Bucket. Now that my bucket's created, I'm going to click on the bucket. That takes me into the bucket, and I'm going to click on Upload to upload some files. You can see here, we can just drag and drop the files. So let's open our Finder application. And I'm just going to drag and drop these two. Scroll down and click on Upload. If I open one of these, let's just open it with Visual Studio. You can see it's just a bit of HTML saying my website homepage, new, now hosted on S3 through Amazon CloudFront, and then it refers to an image. So simple as that, really. I'm going to close this, go back to the S3 website. Those files have uploaded successfully. and then I'm going to move across to CloudFront. Once I'm in CloudFront, our global CDN, I'm going to, you can see CloudFront has 225 plus POPs. I'm going to create a CloudFront distribution. And I can click on choose origin domain. That gives me the opportunity to select the bucket I created from the dropdown. So I'll select that bucket right now. We'll leave that as it is. And then what I want to do, you'll see here we've got two options. Don't use OAI or use OAI. Now, if we selected don't use OAI, we'd have had to make that public. We'd have had to make that bucket public. So I'm going to choose yes, use OAI because we didn't make the bucket public. And then I'm going to create a new OAI. I'll say secure identity for S3, create. I'm going to ask the console to also update the bucket policy, so it makes that available, the connectivity, the access to the bucket available. I'm just going to leave everything else as standard. I'm going to scroll all the way down and go create distribution. It's as simple as that. We've now created a CloudFront distribution, and it's deploying this literally across the world now, across those 225 plus distribution edge locations. The reason I'm showing you this is multifold. The one is it offered me an opportunity to show you how to set up an S3 bucket, create an S3 bucket, which you saw was really quite simple. The other, the other thing it did was gave me an opportunity to talk to you about CloudFront. So what's being set up now, as I mentioned, CloudFront is our content delivery network. If we didn't use CloudFront, that bucket we deployed, that bucket was deployed in Cape Town. Now, the bucket is globally accessible, but given that that data is in the Cape Town region, if you were accessing that data from the US or from Europe, that might be a couple hundred milliseconds of latency across the undersea cables to get to that bucket location. What CloudFront is going to do for us is CloudFront is going to cache objects and files in the edge locations, those 225 plus edge locations around the globe, which means that if you're in Europe and you access this edge location, it's going to deliver that index.html and that image.jpg. It's going to deliver those from the local edge location. And so instead of it taking 180 milliseconds, 160 milliseconds from Europe to get to the Cape Town region, it should just take in the region of, at the most in the tens of milliseconds, but much more likely it'll take, single digit milliseconds to access that content. So let's just look at our distributions. It's still saying deploying. So we'll give it a moment or two more. While we wait for that, the other thing I just need to highlight and underscore is that S3 isn't just for hosting websites, obviously. S3 is highly scalable, industry-leading scalable, highly available. It's those 11 lines that I spoke about, and is super performant. Sorts of use cases you can use S3 for are for building data lakes. As I said, and in this demo, we're using it for a website. You can use it for mobile applications, for backup and restores. Often what you want to do is if you make a snapshot, you'd copy that snapshot. Well, the snapshot will be backed by S3 at the end of the day. I'm going to now, we can see it's been enabled. I'm going to now go to our distribution, copy, paste that in and just say index.html. And this should be, there we go. There's the website that I uploaded to the S3 bucket, and the CloudFront network is effectively fronting that. So that's my little demo on S3. So let's go back to the presentation quickly, and I'll get onto EBS and the rest of the topics, and we'll jump into another demo in a little bit. Cool. So let's get back to EBS. EBS is our elastic block storage. That is basically storage as a service. It's most often used on your EC2 instances. You can attach and create volumes. You can have multiple volumes attached to one EC2 instance, but not the other way around. I'll explain that. It should be noted that EBS does not directly attach disks. It is accessible over the network, but typically with single-digit millisecond latency, and it acts and seems as if it is local storage, though. It does have an independent life cycle. So by that, I mean you can detach it from an EC2 instance and attach it to a different EC2 instance. It can't be attached to both of those instances at once, though. That's what I mentioned, when I said earlier that you can have multiple EBS volumes attached to one instance, but you can't have one volume attached to multiple EC2 instances. We do have a service for that. There are different drive types, and I'll show you that in the demo. It is really easy to use, and it's massively scalable. Again, you'll see that in the demo in a little bit. Volumes are architected for 5 nines availability, 99.999, and an annual failure rate of between 0.1 and 0.2%. The other thing is that you can run encryption on your EBS volumes. And in fact, we have a fairly new announcement, a fairly new service, which allows you to encrypt all new volumes deployed in your account with a single opt-in setting. So helps you meet your compliance goals. And then just quickly on the top of where EBS is used, we really see it across, loads of different workloads and applications. You can see here that, people use it for file and media workloads, often used for kind of, big enterprise grade commercial databases, also for kind of open source databases, for big data analytics. So it really is quite flexible. So that's EBS. I'm going to jump across to EFS now. So EFS is one of our shared file systems, along with Amazon FSx for Windows and FSx for Lustre. So let's get started with EFS. So EFS stands for Elastic File System. So earlier on, I was talking about EBS, which was Elastic Block, right? This one is Elastic File. So this is where we basically have, in the case of EFS, a managed NFS service. It's really that simple. It's elastic, it's scalable, it's highly available. This one you can share across multiple instances. I'll show you how to do that. You can grow it and you pay for what you use as opposed to having to pre-allocate storage. So you can provision it today and then access it. You can also access it from on-premise servers, I must point out. So just a little bit more on it. We launched it back in 2016. It gives you basically just a super simple set and forget, fully managed cloud native file system. You can get it up and running in just seconds and as little as 2 clicks. I'd argue maybe even with 1 click, the way I'll show you on the EC2 console just now. And that gets you petabyte scale elastic storage. It'll scale up or down as in when you add or remove files. You only pay for what you use. Again, highly available. We offer a 4 nines availability SLA, and it's designed for 11 nines data durability. It's also completely serverless. You don't need to provision any servers when you set it up. It scales to tens of thousands of concurrent client connections. Those could be traditional EC2 instances. It could be a whole bunch of other AWS services as well, like Elastic Container Service, Elastic Kubernetes Service, Lambda. So again, very flexible and can scale up to tens of gigabytes of, per second of throughput and support over 500,000 IOPS. So pretty performant. The next two I'm going to cover quickly are the FSX. Oh, sorry, before I jump into FSX, just a couple of use cases around EFS, and this should become a bit more apparent when we go into the demo just now. So now we get onto FSX. So FSX, EFS was a moment ago, I described EFS, which was the NFS, fully managed NFS storage. FSX is now a fully managed SMB storage. So that now provides access for your Windows servers, and is able to, it's a native SMB service, integrates with your Active Directory as well, and provides up to 64 terabytes per file system. You can use DFS namespaces to create shared common namespaces spanning multiple FSX file systems. So you can scale out storage and throughput to virtually unlimited levels. So it's a great way to share files across multiple Windows instances. And then FSX for Lustre. This is a parallel file system, typically used for things like machine learning, high performance computing, video rendering, financial simulations. You'd use it where you need lots of compute instances accessing the same set of data through high performance shared storage. When I say high performance, it really is on a different scale. And so it offers you sub-millisecond latencies with up to hundreds of gigabytes per second of throughput and millions of IOPS. So that was our three shared file systems. It was EFS, it was FSX for Windows, and FSX for Lustre. And now I'm going to show you a little demo where I'm going to demonstrate how to deploy an EC2 instance with EFS and how you can access that same EFS share across multiple volumes. So let's jump into that demo. Let me switch across to my console. Cool. So let me quickly demo EBS and EFS, and let's do a couple of neat little things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to EC2 from our management console, and I'm going to say launch an instance. Say launch instance. And I'm just going to select an Amazon Linux 2 instance. We'll leave it as the free tier, configure instance details. Now this is where it's important. The first thing I want to show you is, if we scroll down a little bit, here's a section called File Systems. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new file system. And this is a neat little setting, a neat little feature in the console in EC2, which lets you deploy a brand new EFS file system. So let's deploy it. Let's say new EFS data, create. And then I can just click on add file system to instance. And now what's going to happen is when we deploy this instance, it's going to attach this file system, mount EFS FS1, and that will be available on this instance automatically. The next thing, now just remember, this is EFS, right? So this is the Elastic file system. We can go add storage, and this is now our EBS. So this is the block storage that comes with it by default. So I'm going to click review and launch. Launch. And view instances. I'll just give it a second for it to come up. There, it's busy deploying the instance. And let's just give it a name quickly. While that's happening, I'm going to launch another instance. Now, if we go down to the file system, I can just click on Add File System, and I can actually pick that new EFS Peter file system that I launched a little earlier. So I can make sure that that one gets added. I can even add additional different file systems. You can see I've been playing around a bit, so I have other EFS volumes. So I can mount those, or I can just mount that individual one. So let's just mount that one I created a moment ago. Add storage. We'll leave it as the default EBS, the block storage. I'll just go review and launch. Launch. Let's call this, yes, whoops. Two. And I'm just going to launch, just in the interest of time, I'll just launch this little web server. That was a web server image I created earlier. And I'll also attach that file system to it. So we've launched 3 instances. So while we wait for these to come up, let's just name this web server. These should be deployed shortly. Let's just give it a moment for them to initialize. So what I want to show you is that we've attached the same EFS volume to all 3 of these servers. So, and in fact, I called this the wrong thing, right? I should have called it EFS. In that. So what I'm going to demonstrate is a couple things. So the first thing is that EFS volume is being shared across, that file system is being shared across all 3 instances. And I'm going to show you how we can use that to our advantage in terms of kind of maintaining, operating our web server. So the first thing I'm going to do is just connect to this instance. Right, now that I'm logged into the server 1, let us do a df. And what we can see is we can see cd mount EFS fs1, and this is our EFS volume, EFS file system. So what we can do is we can just create a file. So let's go nano peter.txt. Hi there. This is a little gift text file for you, Peter. Kind regards, Peter. And then we'll write that. Now, remember our second instance, we attached the same file system. So let's go SSH. Now let's see. Hey, look at that, there's peter.txt. So I created peter.txt on this instance, and it appears on this instance. So you can see that file system is being shared between these instances. The other thing that we can do is I'm going to, let's do this. Let us search for an image. So let us search for, I don't know, puppy. We go images. Let's be a good person and go Creative Commons. And then let's just pick one of these. And go save image as. And I'm just going to save it in my downloads here. That's fine. Oh, I did the wrong thing. What I should have done was this: copy image address. Let's close that. And then let's just go from here. Get blah. Now if we go less, we can go mb puppy to image.jpg. Whoops. Sudo. And then the reason this is important will become apparent in a moment. So what we've gone and done is we've been on EFS1, we logged into EFS2. While we were logged into EFS2, which is this server here, you can see it's 172.31.24.200. So if we go back to our console, there's the private address, 24.200. And we copied a file off the internet and we renamed it image.jpg. So what I'm going to do now is let's just find out what the IP of our web server is. What I can show you, I just need to open up security group, I think. So let's open that security group, edit inbound rules. Let's just allow port 80 in from the internet. And then once we've done that, we should be able to browse to our instance, HTTP. So there we go, 62, 137.62. This is the Apache test page. There it is there, 137.62. So we're on the web server right now, right? That's the test page. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do two things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to SSH onto the server. So let's exit from here. So SSH -I. So now we're on the web server. If we go df, we can see that same file system is being mounted. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to go var HTML. You'll see there's no index.html. So let's make an index.html. So I've pre-created this little text here. So this is Peter's EFS demo website. Welcome to my website linked to EFS. This HTML has a link to an image below, simply named image.jpg on the EFS volume. So I'm going to do this, copy, and then I'm going to do sudo nano index.html. Paste that. You can see it's referencing FS1 image. Now you'll notice if we go back to this website now and refresh, the image link is broken because there is no image there. There is no image file. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to, you'll see that we've got the EFS volume here, but we need to link that volume to our HTML directory. So I am just going to do this. So let's just link it quickly. Now, if we search, now we have FS1. And then in there is the image. So we can leave our web server as it stands now. There's the puppy. We can leave this web server as it stands now, and it's just gonna churn along. So let's just exit from it. I'm not touching the web server anymore. Here's the web server. That's what is serving this text and the image right now. If we hit refresh, there it is there. What I can do though is I can jump back onto this server. Let's jump back onto EFS1. or we can just do it on this server. So on this server, remember, this is 200. This is 200. So it is server 2. So in server 2, let's find another image. So let's find an image of kitten. Images. Creative Commons. And let us do this. We'll click on that. We'll right click on that. Copy image address. Pop into our server and go wget. Whoops. Well, that was a mistake. To wget. Different one. Copy image address. Well, that didn't work. Apologies. Let's try the Randburg Sun. Copy image address. Sudo wget. Go. Now we've got two files. We've got that 1200 by 600 kitten image, and we've got image.jpg. So let's say image, move image.jpg to image2.jpg, and then sudo. And then let's do similar, sudo move 1200 blah 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 to image.jpg. So now we did this on our second server, right? So we're making these changes, we're downloading images, we blah blah blah. This web server is simply just serving an image, whatever's named image.jpg off the EFS volume, it's just serving that. So let's go back here and let's refresh and see what happens. There we go. Sorry, my browser was being funny. It had cached it. So you can see now we can change it back. mb image.jpg to image kitten. And then let's do mb image2 to image jpg. Let's go back, reload, and we're back to the puppy. So we're just modifying file names on the EFS volume. It doesn't matter, in terms of the website, the web server. The web server is just saying, I'm just going to serve whatever's in that EFS volume. So you can see you can use it for config files. There's so many use cases, home directories, all that sort of good stuff where, if you're going to deploy a new server and you need previous data readily accessible, or you need that volume to be shared across multiple instances, EFS is a great way of doing it. And this I think kind of proves that. Right now, all three servers all have that same EFS volume attached to them. And so that's EFS. In fact, if we go down here, what we can do is there's a couple things I want to show you before I jump back to the presentation. The one is volumes. So if we click on volumes, these are the EBS volumes now. So this is the block storage that's attached to each of those three web servers. Sorry, each of the three servers, the two just servers I spun up in the web server. And we can go create new volume. And when we go create new volume, you can see here all of the options we have available to us in terms of type. So GP2, you can see we can go 100 gig or gigabytes up to 16,000 with IOPS up to 3,000. If we change that to GP3, we've now got IOPS up to 16,000. If we change to provisioned IOPS, we've got IOPS up to 64,000. And then, there are the other types that you can choose to deploy on as well. So that was the one thing. Then the other thing is I just wanted to kind of show you that EFS has a dashboard itself. So if we go into EFS, we can see that this is the very newly created EFS file system. These two we're not using at the moment, so I could delete them. I'm just going to go delete, enter the ID, confirm, delete as well, enter the ID, confirm. And then this is the volume that we're using today. And you can see that the current total size is just 6 kilobytes. And as we put more in it, that will automatically grow. You can also define access points. You can access this from on-prem if you so need it. You can create a new file system. We can choose regional, so it stores it across multiple availability zones or a single one. But that's it for the demo. So I hope you found that interesting, and I hope it solidified some of your understanding between EBS and EFS, and gave you some sense of what EFS can do. So let me jump back. Great. So AWS Backup. Aside from the storage you attach to your instances, whether it be EBS, whether it's EFS, whether it's other AWS services that make use of, you still need backups, right? Whether that's, to mitigate something, some sort of application issue, maybe the wrong data was written or deleted by accident. It isn't, backups aren't necessarily just for mitigating disasters or outages. It could simply be that you need last week's data, right? And so to help with that, we have the AWS Backup service. It's a fully managed backup service that makes it easy to centralize and automate data protection and the backing up of data across multiple AWS resources. It's built around a backup plan or a set of rules that define the backup. The rules include things like when to start the backups, the duration of the backup window, the retention period, and you can also utilize tagging to define what resources you want protected. And it's got a console to show you exactly what resources are being protected and how to monitor and restore stuff. So really a great little service to make use of. I'd argue that, if you're going to use AWS storage, probably the easiest couple of things to start with are extending, any sort of backups into S3 or utilizing S3 for additional storage. And the other thing would be for backups. So let me quickly jump into my last little demo to just show you how easy AWS Backup works. So let me switch across to my console for the last time. Cool. So let me show you AWS Backup quickly. It really is only going to take a couple minutes. It is something that you can really benefit from super quickly. If you just check it out, you can go to AWS Backup. We can search for backup. And that. You can see it's got create a backup plan. So I'm just going to click on create backup plan. I'm going to leave it on template. So template, you get a few by default. You can create your own custom template if you like. I'll just use the daily, monthly with a year retention. And I'll call it Peter Backup Plan Demo. I'll leave all of these things as default. I'll go create plan. Now I can assign resources. So I'm just going to go assign resources. So resource assignment. And I can choose my resources. So I can either make sure things are backed up when they use specific tags, or I can go and manually define these things. So I can go resource ID. I can choose. You can see it's got a whole bunch of resources that plug into and integrate very nicely with AWS backups. I'm just going to say EC2. And there are my instances from earlier. Remember, I've got the Peter server with EFS. I can just click on that. Assign resources, and now that instance is being backed up according to this backup plan. How cool is that? And that is pretty much it for AWS Backup. Okay, moving data. So I'm just going to speak to a few services, and then we're kind of done. How do you move data around? So there are a few things that I want to talk to quickly. We do have a service called AWS Storage Gateway that is basically a virtual appliance you can deploy on-premise, which gives you can configure it in a number of different ways. It can provide you with the capability of an S3 file gateway. It can provide you can configure it as an FSX file gateway, a tape gateway, a volume gateway, so you can get to, EBS volumes, that sort of thing. So in the example of, I'll use the example of a tape gateway, for example. You could set up storage gateway. Basically, you install a virtual appliance on premise in your own data center. You configure it as a tape gateway, and it would present a virtual tape library using iSCSI, and you could then send those virtual tapes into an archive tier of storage on S3. So, that's just one example using the tape gateway. You could do something similar with S3 using a file gateway. So you can have file shares that then get backed by S3 on our side. It also includes things like caching. So local files that are accessed frequently, you can define basically a local cache on that AWS storage gateway, and so it'll keep all the regularly actively accessed files in that local cache. That is the on-premises storage gateway. The next few that I want to talk about very briefly is AWS Data Sync. That's a data transfer service. So you can use Data Sync to migrate active data sets to AWS. You can archive data to AWS to free up on-premises storage. It integrates into a number of AWS services on our side. The AWS Transfer family offers file exchange over all the kind of FTPs, so SFTP, FTPS, and normal FTP, and it's deeply embedded into a number of our services. It connects with S3 or EFS. You can do scheduling. You can kind of integrate it into an identity provider with Microsoft AD or LDAP. And then the last one there is on the top is Amazon S3 Transfer Acceleration. So that's a bucket level feature that makes it just even faster to transfer files over long distances between your client and an S3 bucket. So that takes advantage of our own globally distributed edge locations in Amazon CloudFront. So when you want to send data to an S3 bucket, it doesn't go directly to that bucket, which might be overseas, depending on where your client is. It'll go to the nearest AWS edge location and then a route across our network to get to the S3 bucket. So it really increases the kind of speed of that. Direct Connect, if you're not aware, is basically our connectivity service where you can run fiber, you can run dedicated connectivity into AWS. We also have kind of VPN connectivity you can set up. And then on the bottom, you see the snows, the snow cone, the snowball, and the snowmobile. So those you'd use as offline storage. The snow cone it's our smallest little offline device, which can do 8 terabytes of storage. Then there is the snowball, which we can kind of ship to you, and that can do up to around 80 terabytes of storage, depending on the different models of snowball you get. And then snowmobile, maybe not quite as applicable to you, but snowmobile is a container truck offering up to 100 petabytes of offline storage that could literally drive out to your premises, hook into your on-premises data center. You can transfer, with big probably 10, 100 gig pipes, multiple of them, and then transfer data into the snowmobile, and then that drives to an AWS data center where the data is copied across. These things can also be, or are rather, they're tamper-proof, offer a high degree of security, integrate into AWS security services like our key management service for encryption. So they are very, very, very secure. And that is it from me. I hope you learned a few things today. I hope you enjoyed the demos that I showed you. Like I said, I'm not going to dwell on, didn't want to go through those slides and kind of talk you to death in terms of all of the content on them. I'd rather keep that interactive. So yeah, I'll be here for a few more minutes to take any questions you might have in the chat. And I hope you have a good rest of the day. Goodbye.